good morning. Euro standards have killed another motorcycle. This time it's the Triumph Tiger 800. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, because we now have two new models, the Triumph Tiger 900. I'll explain later why there are two, actually there are more. But first, let's talk a bit about the changes. As the name suggests, the engine is bigger, which has become a pretty common trend lately when it comes to meeting new emission standards. Manufacturers are increasing engine displacement. Here we have an advantage over car makers, and in this case it was done by increasing the diameter of the pistons. And since they were already undertaking some pretty serious engine upgrades, they also replaced the crankshafts, camshafts, connecting rods basically. There are a lot of new components here. The gearbox, however, remains the same as before. But what is completely different from the previous model is the crankpin offset on the crankshaft. Now, instead of being offset by 120 degrees, they are offset by 90 degrees, which creates something similar to a fake V configuration, like the one Triumph uses in their twin-cylinder engines. However, it's still an inline triple. So what we have here is something like a fake V3. I know it sounds strange, but what's the point of doing this at all? The idea is that this solution allows you to transfer a bit more torque and power to the low and mid-range RPMs, which is where these kinds of motorcycles are typically ridden. And it has to be said that for efficient riding, even dynamic riding, the range from 4 to 6, 7,000 RPM is actually enough. The pull is really nice at that point. To even talk about any acceleration, it's enough to rev it up to about 2,500, 3,000 RPM, and this motorcycle already goes. Additionally, the revs have dropped during cruising at 120 kilometers per hour. It's about 4,700 RPM. In the previous model, it was about 5,500 RPM, but what has changed is that at high revs, you no longer feel such a noticeable surge of power as you did in the old model. Although the dyno chart shows that the power is not actually lower at those high revs, it's the same. However, the curve itself has changed, the torque delivery is different, and the sensations are completely different. What other impressions do you have after riding this motorcycle? Let me put it this way. Yesterday we spent 450 kilometers on roads of very different quality, and you can definitely feel that the Triumph Tiger 900 is a slightly bigger motorcycle. First of all, around the tank area here, you can feel that it's a bit wider. The seat is wider and definitely more comfortable, and the 800 was already quite comfortable. Wind protection remains at a very good level. It's great that the simple manual windshield adjustment solution is still there, which you can do with one hand while riding. But comfort isn't just thanks to the wide seat. Here, I think I can start talking about the two versions, because now, instead of the XC, XR, XRT and those strange three-letter names, it's been simplified. There's the standard Tiger, which basically doesn't have any of those electronic gadgets. There's the GT and GT Pro versions, and the Rally and Rally Pro. The GT, as the name suggests, is a more road-oriented version with some off-road capability, but mainly intended for the road. It has a 19-inch front wheel and Marzocchi suspension. In the GT Pro version, the rear suspension can be semi-actively adjustable. In the Rally and Rally Pro versions, the suspension is provided by Showa. The wheels are spoked with a 21-inch at the front and a 17-inch at the rear, unfortunately not an 18-inch. It also has a completely different handlebar, higher, more like on an enduro bike. The suspension travel is of course different as well, with 240 millimeters at the front and 230 millimeters at the rear. Here it's 290 millimeters and 180 millimeters. If I'm mistaken, it will be here, and in addition it will be here. However, the features these motorcycles share are of course the same frame, the same engine characteristics, and this time the brakes are not the fixed two-piston Brembos, which were rather spongy in the previous version. This time the manufacturer went with Brembo Stylema, which is actually one of the best sets you can get as a mere mortal. On top of that, there's a radial master cylinder, so the setup is no longer as spongy as it was before. It really brakes very well. Another detail that will definitely please off-road enthusiasts is that the rear subframe can be unscrewed, straightened, welded, or even replaced entirely in case of an accident. So that's really, really good. The two versions also differ in terms of electronics, because here you can have Sport and Sport Pro modes, while here you get Off-Road and Off-Road Pro. For me, the most interesting is the Rally Pro mode, because you can turn off the ABS at the front, at the rear, and also the traction control. But let's get back to the ride itself. I've already mentioned that these motorcycles are comfortable, and there's really no arguing about that. Honestly, after riding 450 kilometers, I still felt fine. I could easily do the same route again, so that's a big plus here. What surprised me though is that I actually preferred riding even on asphalt with the Rally Pro. The wider handlebars, higher riding position, and even the fact that there's a 21-inch front wheel didn't get in the way. In fact, it made it easier to get a feel for the bike and feel more confident on it. and honestly the ride was much smoother and a lot more enjoyable on the Rally Pro. On the other hand, I think the GT Pro will be more suitable for shorter riders. First of all, the handlebars are set lower, the riding position isn't as stretched forward, and you can feel that the bike leans into corners a bit more gently. Both versions performed fantastically on terrible surfaces where there were lots of potholes. However, this one, when it comes to suspension, was more plush and comfortable. The Showa suspension is designed to absorb bigger hits and to be ridden off-road. And today we spent a beautiful day off-road on this motorcycle, and I have to admit, when it comes to the chassis, it's a dream. This suspension really soaked up everything, even when I had to fight to keep the motorcycle stable. Superb, whether after jumps or sliding through corners. A fantastic motorcycle in terms of handling. However, I do have to nitpick a bit about the Triumph. Quite often the motorcycle would stall even when I held the clutch and applied the strong brake, which, by the way, the rear brake is hard to feel when wearing motocross boots, despite the fact that the rally version comes standard with an adjustable brake lever. But yeah, it would stall quite often. Afterwards, it wouldn't want to stop because it seemed to get offended. If I pulled the clutch at the wrong moment, I had to stop, reset the ignition, and only then could I start it again. Sometimes it just likes to get confused like that. First of all, this is actually a well-known flaw of Triumph's. After you turn on the ignition, it has to think for a while, greet your display, good morning on the screen, and only then can you start it. If while the startup menu is loading, you press the clutch and try to start it, it just messes up, no, it won't start. That was very irritating. At some point, I started throwing some unprintable words at Triumph, but only later, once I started riding on trails and paths, did I begin to forgive it a little. I hope that when this motorcycle arrives at Polish dealerships, its connectivity systems will also be improved, because yesterday we tried to connect our phones, and with the GoPro I only saw 2 phones out of maybe 10 or 12 that were able to connect to Triumph's multimedia system in order to control navigation, music calls, and other little things. Not that it's really necessary or that anyone particularly needs it, but since something like this exists and is being released, it really should be refined. And so far, here in the 21st century, while we're trying to make autonomous cars, we still can't manage to create a properly functioning Bluetooth system. However, we did get a test version, and I hope that in the retail version this will be improved. But as you can see for yourselves, the issues and flaws I've mentioned aren't really significant, because it's actually hard to find any major faults with this motorcycle. It's the same as with the Tiger 800. It had its little quirks, but to actually say that something was a serious flaw at this moment, it's hard for me to find such a thing. And I have a feeling that the 900 will repeat the market success of the 800. For me, this is a change that can definitely be seen as positive, and these are the kinds of changes for Euro standards that I can appreciate. Best regards. You can read more in the magazine. Online. I'm signing off. Bye.